Record to the cloud. Okay, so that's going. So we've got 2 hours scheduled for our call here this evening, and our call is about the homeschool progress reports and for January. And what I wanted to talk to you about was just to start by setting the stage a little bit before I turn it over to our speakers. And besides myself. So what I want to do is just talk a little bit about the situation here in Manitoba, which is actually a very good one, in that we are fortunate to be able to home educate the way we are in comparison with many places in the world. Home education has always been legal in Manitoba. Since the inception of the province of Manitoba, it's been possible to home educate. And in the year, I'll let Ellen correct me, but sometime around 1919, when compulsory school attendance came into being in Manitoba, there was a provision at that time for education for home education to be a legal and recognized alternative. So there's very few places in the world where home education has been recognized as long as it has been in Manitoba, and it's I think we're just very fortunate to be able to have that situation here in Manitoba. Our laws here in Manitoba basically provide for what's described as an equivalency law. Basically what it says is that all children must be in school and must be attending school unless they're receiving an education at home or elsewhere. And that's where the provisions of the Public Schools Act come into play, where they provide a mechanism whereby parents can choose home education and be able to participate in home education fully. And it's something that basically that equivalency, what's required is to notify the minister. And of course, the minister doesn't want to talk to you directly. There's staff, and we have 3 of those staff on the call here with us today that are part of that system, and we're going to be hearing directly from them in just a little bit. It's great to be able to have those staff participate in this call with us. And so that it's a notification, and then following that notification, which is a submission of an educational plan, it then requires 2. Well, I shouldn't say that. What it requires is what's called periodic progress reports. And the process in Manitoba that we've agreed to is that there would be 2 of those in January and June. And we're here to talk about the January report, which we support as being a reasonable request, and one that we'll be talking about here today on this call. And I'm just a little bit distracted because I'm trying to type some things into my computer while I'm talking, and I'm not one of the greatest multitaskers, but we'll see how we do at it. We'll see whether that password works. So to start us off, I'm going to ask Larissa MacDonald, who is a homeschool mom and a homeschool leader of the Westman Homeschool Connection and from Western Manitoba. I'm going to ask Larissa just to talk a little bit about some of her experience and perspectives as a homeschool mom to start off. And I suspect that Larissa will probably be raising some questions, or her presentation will raise some questions that will have the Department of Education liaison representatives. We've got 3 of them on the call here with us today, and 2 of them, as far as I know, will be presenting, but we'll have a chance to meet them all. And so I'm going to turn it over to Larissa and just ask her to kick it off from a parent's perspective. of what's been your experience, Larissa, and what's involved, and what does this look like in terms of progress reporting? And we've got a great room full of people here, 85 participants so far, and increasing. So it's great to see you all here with us. And we will, after the presentations, have a time when we can go through some questions and have you ask your questions directly and be able to address them. So Larissa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Gerald. Welcome here, everyone. As we were looking at the lineup for tonight, I'm sort of wondering why I need to be here, but I guess at the very least, it's always good to have someone who's in the trenches with you to see and to hear from. I first sent in my first report for our oldest in 2009, and I just had someone ask me tonight how many I'd done. I've sent in 44 notification forms, and so then double that many of reports almost. Our oldest just graduated last year, and our youngest is 3, so I'll be at this for a long time yet. As for how I think about the reports themselves, I'm really not worried about them. I'm not worried about receiving a call from Manitoba Education asking a question about them, although that has not happened to me yet. I'm not worried about them saying yay or nay. I know that if there's something on them that raises questions, that they can come to me and we can discuss it. And it's not going to be a matter of whether I can or cannot homeschool. So that's never been an issue or a worry for me. It doesn't take that long to complete them. It takes me probably more than an hour now, but I'm doing 6 at a time. And one thing I do want to mention is to make sure you keep a copy of all of the things you send in. Keep a copy. I have actually my first one here. I'll mention it a little bit later. There's a funny thing that happened with that when I looked at it tonight. And I keep them all, and so every September when I go to fill out my notification report, I can look at last year. Is it going to be the same things on it again, or is it going to be new things? Are we doing the same program? Did we do a full year or not? What kinds of things do I need to change? What things didn't work from last year? And then when I go to fill out the January reports, it's the same thing. I always print off a hard copy, even though I keep a file on my computer now too, just so I can have it in front of me while I'm typing, because you can't have 2 Adobes open at the same time. And I look at what did I put down? Are we still using that or not? And how far along in that are we? In our house, what they do from grade 4 up is very different from what the early years do. So my kids in K to 3 basically do language arts that's structured, and everything else is learned life lessons, what they're interested in.
George, you must stop and not join audio. Do not numbers agree and none shorted.
So in January for my little kids, much of my reporting is whether or not they're making progress in their reading or not, and in their writing skills. And so with that, if they're doing cursive or manuscript, I write what point we're at in the book, what page number kind of thing. Just really general what they're learning and what they're interested in, what progress they've made in those early years skills. The social studies, science, and math is life learning. So they're continuing to learn about their environment. They're continuing to learn about their community, that kind of thing. And it's usually satisfactory progress, even for my son, who is really struggling with reading and always has been, because he is continuing to make progress, even if it isn't where I would like him to be. It's still satisfactory. He's making progress. He's still trying and learning and growing, and that's the important thing to me. From grade 4 and up, we use a structured curriculum. So then my progress reports become much easier. I can look at what unit we're in, and less of the people in the homeschool office, they can sort out all of my strange unit numbers, because I have some kids that start in April, some that start in September, and some that start in November. And so it doesn't matter if I put down that they're in unit 10 or in they're in unit 27, they somehow sort that out and know that I have made progress since my last report. And so, yeah, just putting down the unit to show progression in what they have learned across the year. The satisfactory checkboxes, I like to use them. They're not required. There is one time where I had 3 checked off and 1 not. I had a high schooler who somehow just didn't bother to do his math all year. And so when I checked in January, he was not anywhere near even a quarter done his year, and it had to be a not satisfactory progress for him that year. And so that just lets them know in the office where we need to work on the next semester. Also, changes. I have had changes, complete curriculum changes, as in my grade 7 student started with teaching textbooks this year and then decided he wanted to try Life of Fred. So he's switched that completely. So on my progress report, I just simply put that he's doing Life of Fred, and he's done these 2 books, and he started this one, which is a review one way back earlier, because I still have to order the next one. He's gone through those. So just put where you're at. It really doesn't matter. The other part of that is that sometimes it's a level and something is just not working. I sent in my notification in July one year that we were switching curriculums and I was going to put my daughter in level 5. And before we got anywhere near that school year, I realized there was no way she was going to be able to survive that level. So I put her in level 4. And after 10 units of torture, to the point where it was either her or me in tears every day, we realized that something had to change, and that curriculum had to go, and we went a lower level yet. And so I put her in the 3rd level and switched out all the language arts. We didn't learn till 4 years later that she has Erlen syndrome and really struggles with reading because things seem to move on the page for her, and glasses dealt with that when she was 14, but at 10 we didn't know that. And so what I put on the January report for her was 2 levels lower than what I put on the notification form. And thanks to the people in the office again, I didn't even get a phone call on that one. But they'd really want to know. And so what I included on that was not just this is the level she's in, but that she is succeeding and gaining confidence where she's at. And that's the thing. She was gaining skills. She was improving in what she was doing. It doesn't matter what level of curriculum she was in. She was moving forward in her skills and in her knowledge at that point. And I think the only other thing I wanted to mention was that other category at the bottom. Don't forget to put in all the extras that you do as a family that can be part of an education, even if it's not part of academics. So things like awards that they've won, if they enter a contest of some kind, if they are in positions of volunteering. I had a daughter who volunteered for 2 months in a restaurant and a son who volunteered for about 6 months a year for 4 years, 2 hours a week at a feed mill. Put that on there so that they know that they're learning things in other areas as well, that they're learning from other people as well. If they start any lessons, even here during COVID, some people are doing guitar lessons on Zoom or whatever the case may be, put those in there. We do 4-H, so I put what project they're in. I usually leave communications, the speech competition that they do around February, I leave that for the June report. But all of those things together show the academics that they're gaining, the education that they're gaining, not just the academics. So it's all important to include, even if it's just 4-H and you don't have room for anything more this time, you can add more on your June report, that kind of thing. I don't know if I've ever had to add a second page to any of mine. Sometimes I print it off and then write really small, but they redid the reports this year and they're great. I love the new formatting. So there's a lot more room to add stuff there. So I think that's all I have until someone asks me a question. So back to you, Gerald.
Well, thank you, Larissa. Really appreciate your sharing from your perspective and your experience, which is pretty significant. I want to just move along. And what I want to do right now is I want to introduce our 3 Manitoba Education staff that are on our call. And so I'm going to introduce the 3 of them, and then they're going to take us through a bit of a presentation of the process from their perspective of notification, specifically the January report. But I'll start with Ellen Schroeder. Ellen, you want to wave? Your name is there on the screen, but if you want to wave and people can see who you are. Ellen began teaching a few years ago, 1974. In the Transcona Springfield School Division, working with students through all grade levels in that division for over 16 years. In 1990, he became a principal
and was a principal for 19 years in the Rhineland School Division in Altona, which happens to be where he was born. In 2009, Ellen began a 3-year tenure as a seconded chairperson, specially chosen, for the Council of School Leaders in the Manitoba Teachers Society. And then in the summer of 2012, we got to know him as he began his work in Manitoba Education as a liaison with the Homeschooling Office. Ellen and I have enjoyed a number of opportunities to work together and to be on various seminars and meetings together. And Ellen also works with non-funded independent schools and overseas schools, and that's where he continues today. Ellen also has experience, for those of you that love agriculture like I do, farmed from the age of 13 until 1998 with his family. Ellen has stayed in touch with those ag roots and credits that with connecting him with so many rural families and communities with in his present job and capacity. And I think that those roots always serve us well. Michelle Robert Marchildon. Michelle taught in the French and French immersion setting in the public school system. Michelle, do you want to wave, or maybe you already did? Great to have you with us. She and her husband decided that they would homeschool their children, and Michelle became a stay-at-home mom for 17 years. Michelle homeschooled their 2 boys from kindergarten to grade 12, and both boys have completed their post-secondary studies and are thriving in their chosen career paths. The oldest has recently been hired by NATO, wow, and will start work in Belgium this fall. The youngest works for a company that's also providing him with education towards specialized certification. When her youngest son was almost finished his homeschooling, Michelle completed her master's degree in education administration, and she worked for the French division of the Ministry of Education as a special projects coordinator for 3 years. When an opportunity to work in the homeschooling office presented itself, Michelle jumped on the chance, and it was like coming home. Michelle's professional and personal interests come together as she supports homeschoolers in their journey. It's really special to have a homeschool mom sitting in the chair that you sit in, Michelle. And I haven't got to know you really well, but certainly enjoyed the visit over the last couple of weeks. And welcome to our meeting here today. The last one is Peter Andres. Peter is a farm boy at heart, another one. He is an educator who loves learning and adventure. Peter worked as a teacher for 18 years in both independent and public schools before serving with the Jump Math organization as an outreach manager. He then joined Manitoba Education as a math consultant before most recently joining the team of liaisons at the homeschooling office. Peter is a father of 3 and enjoys the thrill of learning new things every day. And Peter, great to have you here with us. And so between Ellen and Michelle and Peter, I will turn it over to you. And we've got sort of a list of questions that we met to talk about earlier. And I know that you'll be working your way through those. So over to you, and hopefully the technology, just go ahead and share your screen when you need to, and we should have permissions to do that.
Thank you, Gerald. I haven't used Zoom as of yet for sharing a screen, so please do bear with me here, and I'll see if I can get this to work.
Yep, just click on the share screen button at the bottom. It will share whatever you have on your screen, and hopefully you've got the right things on your screen.
Okay, I think we're off to the races. Can everybody see the screen that says January Homeschooling Progress Report presented by Michelle Marchildon and Alan Schroeder? Is that
no, I can't.
You can't?
No, it hasn't come up.
Can't see it yet.
Can't see it yet. Because, well, hang on. Let me see what's happened here. Hang on, because my video is running. So why? Always technology.
It's always a matter of picking the right screen, because there's usually a number of them, even if you only have one.
What about no, that's not it. Or is it? Because the screen that should come up should be this one. Now, why is it not? Why is it not coming up? Okay, hang on.
When
One
you,
more
when you go to
thing.
share screen, there should be,
There we
there you
go.
go.
There we
Yeah.
go.
Got it.
Okay, it's a little different than Teams and some of the other platforms I've used. And so my sincere apologies for that.
Well, you're
Okay,
doing good, Ellen.
so everybody can see January homeschooling progress report? Okay.
Yes.
That's good.
Awesome. Okay, so welcome to everyone who has joined us this evening. We thank you very, very much for the opportunity to present. And we have roughly 23 slides that we'd like to work through and present to you. And we're very appreciative of any questions you may have at the conclusion of this presentation. So, there are 4 liaison
Just want to
officers.
double check, Ellen, I just want to double check and make sure that people are seeing
Sure.
the presentation on their screens.
Looks good on my end.
Good. Go ahead, Ellen.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, interrupt anytime, Gerald, where you're concerned about the technology. There are 4 liaison officers working currently, as Gerald had mentioned, Michelle and myself and Jasmine and Peter. Jasmine came to us from the distance learning unit because I think, as everyone or many people may be aware, the distance learning unit will be closing at the end of June 2021. And Jasmine, with the experience she had working with homeschooling families through the distance learning unit, was a really welcome addition. Peter, originally, when he first came to the department, came as a homeschool liaison, but he got the call of the math. And that lured him into a mathematics consultant position for a period of time. And eventually, Peter came back to his original hired roots, which is the homeschooling office. And we're so glad that Peter was able to do that. We work to support families and to help them meet all of the requirements that we're tasked with ensuring occur in the Public Schools Act.
Yeah, and when Larissa was presenting, she alluded a little bit to perhaps a perception of when a homeschooling liaison connects with the family. Even when I was homeschooling, I think it's like a longstanding negative perception that that concerns families when a liaison tries to communicate with a homeschooling family. And I think the 4 of us, although Jasmine isn't here this evening with us, we all want to reassure you that we're here to, work with families, to support families, and just to ensure that families have success meeting those, requirements as outlined in the Public Schools Act. And then Gerald, discussed a little bit about equivalency, and that's exactly what we strive to do and to support families with. So we really want to reassure you that we hope you see some friendly faces here this evening in myself, Alan, and Peter. And I'm sure if ever you met Jasmine, you would know she's a darling and always very happy to connect with families.
All right. Okay, so when it comes to the progress reports, as an example, the legislation really for the progress reports is rooted in the Public Schools Act, Section 260.1, Part 4. And basically all it says is that the parent or guardian shall provide the minister with periodic progress reports on each pupil in the home school. The reports must contain the information and be provided according to a schedule determined by the minister. And the ministers, from the time I started with the homeschooling office, had chosen twice yearly at the end of January and the end of June. And I understand from what Gerald was saying, and I have been cognizant of this before, that there was prior conversations with a number of homeschooling groups where these reporting periods were outlined and have been in place without really any kind of a change, probably for more than 20 years. Or Gerald, would you say about 20 years?
It's a lot more than 20 years.
Yeah.
At least since 1990.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we're talking
Mhm.
30 years plus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Alan, I think we skipped to slide 3, or based on my notes here, we're missing slide 3.
Okay.
There you go. I can cover this one if you like.
Sure.
So
Okay.
I think also we just wanted to highlight section 262B of the legislation where, you know, basically what we do, the field representatives, so the homeschooling liaison officers, we're looking for that equivalency. And as you know, you're providing your child with a standard of education at home, equivalent to that provided in a public school. And so that's what we are tasked, I'd ask, to determine is that equivalency piece. And that's, as it's stated, the public school is the reference point for that equivalency. And this is why some homeschooling families, you know, do get a communication from the liaison officers, either by email or by phone, where if we had a question for a program outline or a report, we just like to connect with the families to bring any clarification that we need in order to, you know, work through any questions that come up. And in the fall, I do want to mention that this past fall, because we did definitely had a huge influx of interest in homeschooling, and unfortunately we weren't able to maybe connect with all the families the way we would have liked to, especially with questions that we might have had in the program outline. And so families might have received an email or a letter indicating insufficient program outlines and requesting additional information to be included in the January report. So if you did get one of those letters, you know, we're more than happy to help you if you're not understanding what we're asking. But basically, you know, any of the 4 of us, the liaison officers, would be happy to connect with you and help you through that. And if you're understanding what we're looking for, then you can go ahead and just, you know, indicate the request, what would the requested information in your January progress report.
And we talked about those periodic reports just a bit ago. So we'll move to slide 5. Michelle, were you going to cover slide 5?
Sure, if you'd like me to. So as Alan was mentioning, the process for homeschooling falls in January and June of each year, and for each child. And I know Larissa spoke to that as well. And so, you know, by the end of these respective months is usually when we would like to, you know, we expect to receive these, the reports. And I wanted to maybe highlight that a homeschool family that starts homeschooling in January, so they've just started, they would be required to submit the student notification form, but not the January progress report, simply because their starting point is now, or January. So, you know, when we receive notification forms like that mid-year, a liaison officer may request that the family share with the homeschooling office a recent report card from the school where the student had been attending prior to homeschooling. And then from there, we, you know, just kind of add that to the family file in order to provide a complete academic record for that current school year. So if the student was attending school prior to that, you know, first notification in January, then we might have a conversation with the family just about completing their record on file with us with their most recent report card.
Yeah, and I had just such a family very recently who sent in the report card, and the mom emailed me and said, asked if she still had to fill out a January progress report, and I said no, because your son was in a school till Christmas time, and now we're off to the races with homeschooling. When we talk about reporting, we don't see it only as a piece of of a requirement as per legislation. We feel that there are real benefits for students in regards to the homeschooling progress reports, because they are really the official educational record for each homeschooled child. And yes, we keep them in the homeschooling office, but if you ever need a copy of those reports, I've had families that have had house fires and they've lost all of their documentation. But because they have provided some fairly robust reports, I made copies of all of those reports and mailed the copies out to them so that they had their record of their homeschooling years for their students back in their hands again. So good reporting has a benefit, not just for for emergencies like that, but it can also support future enrollment in a school or an application to a post-secondary institution. I know that many families say, well, my kids will never go back to a school. Sometimes life causes things to happen where there may be a circumstance where a student may need to enroll somewhere else, even for a year or part of a year. Having good records really assists your family in terms of making that step when that's needed.
Yeah, and then in the reporting process, we're asking that, the requirement is to report in the 4 subject areas, so language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. As Larissa, already mentioned, you're highlighting the progress and the learning of your child. And so it's up to you, the parent, then to try and represent that learning for us, so that when we read the progress report, we see, that journey.
Did you want to continue and just talk about
Sure.
the rest of the options?
So yeah, and Larissa actually brought this up as well, the importance of the other section on the form. So families may report, on other areas of studies. We've highlighted a few examples like physical education, music, religious studies, languages, art, career development. There are so many more areas. There's volunteer, like Larissa mentioned. There's just all different ways to round out, a child's education, and all these other options are a great benefit to the child and paints a really nice picture of their learning. So we definitely encourage, I know there's not a lot of room on the form for the other section, but we definitely encourage, that parents, indicate these areas of learning, because it is an important part of growth.
Yeah, and I've had, just to add to that, Michelle, I've had some families that have sent some pictures in with their January report of some of the activities their students have been involved in. They've emailed me those pictures. I print them. We put them in the family file. They become part of that archive for the student or those students of that family in regards to the different activities that they've been involved in. And it's really neat to see some of the different things that kids are doing and the learning that's taking place at the same time. So the Fillable Homeschooling Progress Report can be found by clicking on the January or June PDF forms on the notification package webpage. So if you go to the homeschooling website, you click on the notification package tab, which is on the left-hand side. That'll bring you to all of the different reports. You don't have to download the whole package. We've got them nicely split out now so that there is the whole package if you want it, but there's also just the notification form, the January form, the June form. So parents have a menu that they can choose from.
When using the fillable forms that are available to you on the website, we just want to remind families that it's really important to have the most recent free version of Adobe Reader on your computer. This will enable you to use those fillable forms much more smoothly. You would download the forms first to your computer and save them there. Once downloaded to your computer and you open it up again, it'll open up in Adobe. and you can begin completing it from that point. And we do, and I know Larissa said it too, but we really recommend you save your form prior to submitting it to the homeschooling office. We have had incidents where families didn't save their forms, and we gladly provide them with a copy, the copy that we receive. But it's just really good practice to save those forms prior to submitting them to us.
And especially where you're mailing in original copies and you're post mailing them. We've had situations where I know the family has put their forms in the mail. They have never arrived. Somewhere along the line, Canada Post lost the stuff. And it's so dismaying to the parents and also for us, because I can feel the angst on the phone that the parent has, that they know they've mailed it, but a month later, we've never gotten it. When you're completing the form for January, the parent and student information boxes on the top half of the form need to be completed. In the section that asks for the MET number, which is a unique 9-digit number that every student in Manitoba is assigned when they start their education in Manitoba, whether it's kindergarten, grade 4 if they're moving into the province, or grade 11 if they're moving into the province, they get this unique number. And you'll see that number on the confirmation of notification letter that the homeschooling office sends you after we've reviewed your notification form and are ready to send you a confirmation letter. But if you don't know your MET number, don't worry about it. It's not necessary to call us to ask about it. If you can't find your confirmation of notification letter, because if your January report comes back blank as far as the MET number goes, we will just fill it in.
Yeah, and when completing the form, we recommend. Sorry, I'm just on the wrong page here. We recommend some best practices that you see on the slide here that might help guide your thinking while you're completing the form. So something you can think about is, what is my child doing well? What are they struggling with? What might need improvement, and maybe what next steps you might take in your programming. So hopefully these this little list can help you in your thinking when you're preparing those forms.
Yeah, and if it means that the student is struggling in a math program, consider changing the math program. I know that I've had parents in their January report saying that their student was having trouble in an area, and then they wrote a question, what would you do? I call them. I then call the parent and we talk about, okay, here are some options that you might want to consider. And, don't be afraid to ask questions of us in your forms. We will get back to you.
Yeah, I wanted to say too, thank you for sharing that, Larissa, that you went fairly long with that program until you finally changed it. And you obviously recognize you were struggling with that programming, and you can move out of it into another area. And I'm really appreciative of that sharing.
All right, so in completing the form, parents may assign a number or a letter grade, but it's certainly not necessary. If as a parent you're using a structured curricula, you can put down or notate the units that have been completed. You're encouraged to reference the student resources that you're using to support learning. Maybe there are new resources that you have found, as an example, in middle or late November that you didn't count on finding, but you stumbled across them on the internet, and you're now using them to really good success. So put those things down so that we have that picture of how things are proceeding for you and that student in their program.
Yeah, and again, as Alan just said, when you make changes to that program outline or to your student resources, even though you've already submitted your notification form, just indicate these changes in the progress reports. We expect that there are going to be changes because it's really hard to foresee what you're going to do for the full year. I mean, some families, you start out, even if you start out with a structured curriculum and you think, yeah, we'll definitely do this for the full year, you may hit a wall and need to make some changes. And so that's great. I think it's important to be ready to adapt to the students' needs and to, you know, where you're at, and just let us know in the progress reports.
All right. When you're developing comments in regards to how your students are doing at home, those comments within each subject area contribute to a really complete homeschooling record. Parents are always encouraged to provide detailed comments that describe their child's learning, and you can provide that using anecdotal observations or short stories, or in the forms of sentences that go with how you see that learning taking place. And as Michelle had said before, and I think Larissa had also said, the forms have been updated to allow for at least 5 lines of information. I know Michelle has done some experimentation and she's gotten more than 5 lines in some of the subject areas. Parents may submit concise and complete information in the text boxes. The comments can include topics, units of studies, activities, projects, skills, and information learned, as well as resources. And that's really important for parents to comment on, where they've got a child-centered program or a program with a lot of self-determination by the student in terms of where they want to take their studies.
Yeah, and some families feel that the form just doesn't, you know, provide them with the kind of room that they need to report on the progress. And so we, you know, we're happy to accept documents that are attached to the progress report form. We still ask that you fill in the top half of the progress report form, so the parent and student information. But then if you, for the subjects, if you prefer to write see attached and attach, you know, a Word doc or whatever it is you like to work in, we're more than happy to accept that as well. And Larissa even mentioned that there are the additional check boxes that are there for to indicate satisfactory progress. So you're certainly welcome to use those check boxes as well. I did want to maybe comment that when a homeschooling liaison receives a progress report without any comments, liaisons will most likely communicate with that family by phone or by email. And this is because the liaisons are required to determine equivalency. And it's pretty difficult to do that with only check marks, like check marks in the box, you know, for a progress report. So, so families, you know, can expect a liaison to communicate with them and have a nice chat. And oftentimes I've chatted with families and gotten a wonderful picture of the learning and taken some notes onto the form that they submitted and kind of use that as their comments, you know, throughout our conversation, with their permission, of course. So when talking about equivalency, I see a question came in the chat. When talking about equivalency, what we're talking about is, again, back to that 262B of the legislation, the section 262B, which asks that, you know, we're looking for an equivalent in education. And like I was saying earlier, the public school is the standard by which we determine equivalency. But I think it's a pretty broad term. And you'll find that liaisons are very open to all kinds of opportunities in education. And so we are very comfortable working with families and where they're at and how they're approaching, you know, different ways of approaching education. It's just mostly that's the term that is in the legislation. And so that's the one that comes back the most often when we're talking about what we're looking for, I guess, when we're reading all of the notification forms and the progress reports.
Yeah, and when I think about the 8 years now, and this is now going to year 9 that I've worked with homeschooling families, and I think about the legislation around equivalency, I at times am very thankful that we've got the latitude that we have, and thus the parents have the latitude that they have for the programming that they would like to undertake. because I see other jurisdictions where they've tried to nail equivalency to the wall, like it's a piece of hardtack or something, and it ends up being so narrow in scope that I don't know whether parents then have the same kind of sense of freedom that we really, I think, have here in Manitoba. We have common questions that come up through our conversations with parents, and especially this fall, the first question that you'll see there, what about the complete Canadian curriculum? And it's unfortunate that workbook got the name that it did, or was assigned the name that it does or has, because it's really more of a Canadian curriculum outline rather than a book that would support a year's worth of learning. It's really just good as a supplement, but it doesn't provide sufficient educational programming and practice for the school year, and thus the complete Canadian curriculum does not meet equivalency. Really good students in 6 to 8 weeks will blow through that book and finish everything. And when I was talking to parents last fall, they often acknowledged, yeah, my son is 3/4 of the way through that book. And so I said, well, let's talk about some other things that you might want to look at using, because what are you going to do when they're done? You've got so much of the year left. And so it's unfortunate. It's not the parents' fault that they've chosen it. The marketing has been spectacular for the book, but unfortunately, it just doesn't cover things in a complete enough fashion where it allows students to really develop the mastery in the skills area that they need to.
Yeah, another common question is, what about unschooling, and how do I report in the progress report for that approach? So, unschooling is an approach, and a parent may take a child-centered approach when unschooling, where the child, to a degree, determines the topics of study within either language arts, mathematics, science, or social studies. Sometimes it's for part of their learning, sometimes it's for all 4 subject areas. It really depends. When a parent is using the unschooling approach, it doesn't necessarily mean it's exclusive. It can be blended with some structured mathematics program, for example. But when reporting, for everyone, but including the unschooling approach, you would outline in your January report the topics, the concepts, the areas and units of studies, along with your resources that you might have used in any progress made. So here again, the parents are representing the learning of the child, like any parent would, even if you were using a structured curriculum. So the approach of unschooling or child-centered doesn't really change what you're reporting on. It's just how has the child progressed, and where has the learning sprouted from. And a student that chooses the topic of study, that's fantastic. But obviously from that point, then you will acquire resources or ways of working through that topic or that interest. So when unschooling, just think about how you'll represent that learning and what they've grown in.
Another question we get is, my son or daughter is struggling with the program that they're working in. And, for a parent to say that is a real opportunity for we as liaisons to work with that parent to really find out what exactly is the parent experiencing with their learner, and what, are the things that they are seeing and that they're hearing. And it gives us an opportunity to strategize with the parent in regards to what might they do a little differently, what materials might they consider that are different. We never, ever look at a parent who says, my learner is struggling. We never look at a parent and say, well, what aren't you doing? Because the thing we know is that parents are working their hardest to make sure that their kids are going to be successful. And it takes a lot of courage for a parent to say, my learner is struggling. Can we talk about this? And absolutely, we'll talk about it, and we'll do what we can to assist that family. I know there have been some situations that I've been in with families where we've had good conversations. We've tweaked their programming a little. In one case, the parent was so afraid that she had to only provide at grade level material, even though her student in mathematics really needed a program that was a grade level lower. You know, once we sorted that all out and we got her going again, things really improved. So don't ever think that you'll be judged as a parent if you say, my learner is struggling, can we talk about it? You'll never be judged.
Another question, then I see it's in the chat as well. What about special needs or disabilities? You know, parents are definitely encouraged to modify their program to meet their students' needs. And you would know what those are best. And we, you know, want parents and encourage parents to offer authentic and appropriate learning for each child. And so, so please, you know, if you do indicate it in the notification form or in the progress reports, it definitely helps give us context in understanding where the child is at and sort of your plan and where you're headed, how you're adapting the learning or modifying it to meet the needs. All very important and very good. And again, liaisons might communicate with you because we sometimes have access to some information or some programming or supports that might be helpful to parents facing some of these challenges in a learner's you know, journey. And hopefully we can, you know, provide some support that way. So we, you know, we recommend for sure, if you're comfortable in sharing it with us, we're more than happy to support that. And also, you know, when families do indicate, you know, some needs or some learning needs or a disability, and we know the student has attended school prior to homeschooling, we may ask if the school had done an IEP, which is an individual education program, and ask if the family would be comfortable sharing it with us, because that gives us a better understanding of the student's needs and maybe how we can continue or, you know, assist the parent based on those needs. So absolutely, you would, you know, hopefully feel comfortable indicating, you know, where your child is at and that you're offering authentic and appropriate learning to that child.
Another common question we get is, what about a semester approach? Do I have to do all the subjects all the time? And at the K-8 level, we really do recommend that the math and language arts be a year-long program, if at all possible, because they are both languages that really develop in people the ability to interact with their world. Mathematics is a language just like language arts is in regards to reading, writing, speaking, listening, representing, that kind of thing. Some families might offer science or social studies in a semestered approach, where they might do science with the math and LA for half the year and then social studies with the math and LA for the other half of the year. For grades 9 to 12, many families do offer 2 subjects one semester and 2 subjects the second semester. A really good test of that is, what does your student prefer? You know, include with your considerations their input in regards to what they want to do as well. And so, you know, you may have one student that really likes that semestered approach, another student that wants to do all 4 subjects all year long. So as a parent, then it just requires more flexibility in your part to try and make that work. And where you do use the semestered approach, please indicate that on the student notification form and also in the subject areas of the comments in the section of the January progress report, so that, you know, if you're doing science the second term, just indicate science will be worked on or completed or addressed in the second term, because then we know that you're working through a semestered approach. And that's quite all right, as long as that's something that's going to work for not only the student, but also for you as their teacher.
Yeah, so I wanted to, highlight that just recently the liaison, we sort of got together and put together some sample, January sample progress reports because we identified that need that we were getting a lot of questions as it was coming up. And so what we have posted now on the website, on the notification package page of the website for homeschooling website, we do have 3 samples for the January reporting. We have the grade 2, grade 8, and grade 11 levels. So trying to show you a sort of an early years, a middle years, and a senior year level sampling of what January reporting could look like. And we also tried to feature different approaches. I think we'll speak to that a little bit further into the presentation, the types of approaches we see. But please note that you're not limited to any of the ways that we've featured these samples. These are simply hopefully to help you think about it a little more, but not to box you in any kind of way that this is how it's supposed to be. So here is a sample of social studies. In this sample for grade 2, the family has chosen a structured faith-based curriculum, a BECA specifically, so they've named the curriculum, and they're just, expressing how their child is enjoying the learning and creating, being creative with the learning and representing the learning, not necessarily by writing. In this case, it was a diorama. And so just really nice, see, and it's very concise, but also very complete. And so hopefully this, will help you as you look through the samples of the types of or different ways you can present the information.
And moving on to another sample of a grade 8 student that is now posted. We tried to indicate what a report might look like, where the student was using some online material, as well as material that's a recognized Manitoba Public Schools curricula material. And the report talked about the things that the student is finding to be challenging, and how the family is focusing the challenges she has in regards to the details that they want her to show in terms of her thinking and her written work. And also, in this case, the student does work with a tutor. Now, we're not suggesting you go out and hire tutors for your students, but we're just providing an example of a student where a family has chosen to hire a tutor for that particular subject area.
And this grade 11 sample for language arts, what we chose to highlight here was that it was a child-centered approach, and also with a First Nations perspective. And so the family, with regards to the child-centered piece, the student chose the topic of study, also chose how in what direction they would take the study. In this case, it's to do with Shakespeare and Macbeth, and then representing the learning through a traditional dance project with the help of an elder. So it's just nice to see, again, the representation of the learning in different ways. And in this sample or example, they attached a list of resources that the student and the parent would have maybe found together, and kind of built her language arts programming on using these rich resources that they've discovered.
Right. So when you're looking at these 3 samples that you'll now find on the homeschooling website, you'll see that in each case, we tried to do something different for each of the subject areas, for each of the students, rather than putting together a pile of different samples, like 16 samples, one which would be structured faith-based, another would be student-centered, that kind of thing. We tried to plug in some different approaches in each of the students' reports. By no means should you take that as meaning that's what you have to do. We just tried to produce fewer samples that told a broader story. We know that there are families that use a particular curricula for all of their subject areas. We have other families that have one curricula for math, another one for language arts, yet another for science, and a fourth one for social studies. And that's quite fine. Whatever is going to work for you and your family, where you've made the decision, and as long as they're learning and you feel that the progress is what it should be, you're good to go. We just wanted to try and present something for you within the different examples without flooding you with samples to the point where after you read the seventh one, you'd say, I've had enough, I don't want to read anymore. We just don't want to go there. So hopefully it'll help where less is actually more.
And then finally, as we've mentioned, so we have those 3 January samples up. They contain, as Ellen mentioned, different approaches. So some are faith-based programming, some are Manitoba curriculum, others are child-centered, some is non-Manitoba resource usage, others have the attached information, all of which we don't expect to see all of that in one parent's reporting. This is just, we blended it so that you can see different approaches, different samples of learning, and hopefully you can find this information helpful.
And Gerald, we are at a point now where would you like to entertain questions for us to talk about?
Yes, we definitely would, Ellen and Michelle. Thank you, and thank you, Peter. Peter has been busy answering lots of questions on the chat, and it's great to be able to have the questions. I know Larissa has been also helping in that. It's the Zoom is great in that we can do the presentations, but you can also multitask and be asking questions as we go along. So just to start off, I'm going to just go through a couple of questions that have been raised that I don't think have been asked or answered as fully as we could. One is from Helena, and she said that she had talked to somebody in Manitoba Education, and they suggested that she stay in touch with the school because she has a grade 10 student in order to get credits. Now, I'm assuming that this may be because there's some parents who are not sure whether they're going to continue homeschooling with COVID and all that kind of thing, and they want to make sure that their options are open. So maybe Ellen and Michelle, I'll just ask you to speak to those people who are, probably at a place where they are maybe wanting to send the kids back at some point. And what kind of advice do you have for paving the way or smoothing out that transition should it come in the future?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because we're talking at the high school level, which is a little bit different from K to 8. I think there's a lot more flexibility with regards to homeschooling. But when you hit the high school levels, if your goal, the student's goal, is to achieve a Manitoba high school diploma, then there are requirements that need to be met in order to do so. And so when that's the goal, and we usually as liaison officers will ask that question right off the hop, making sure that we're giving the appropriate information to the parent. So if again, I'm going to assume the goal is to achieve the requirements for the Manitoba high school diploma, then the student needs to maintain the acquiring of those credits, basically those courses with the credit recognition. And to do so, there's a few avenues open to them, but not too many. So there is definitely working with the school, and maybe through, this year with COVID, there might have been a situation of remote learning or half-time remote learning, that kind of thing. at the high school level. Some families opted for the independent study option from the distance learning unit, and that option comes with a price tag. And so families do, pay about $250 per course for that option. And then again, to maintain those credit requirements, would have had to see their child probably doing a minimum of 4 courses or credits per semester. So that can get a little pricey. And then finally, the newest, I guess, option that's the province announced was InformNet, or like a virtual high school. And with InformNet, again, the child can access that credit recognition and register for courses at $300 a course. And to date, what we've heard is many students are limited to 2 courses per semester. And so that also has its limitations. We have heard of some students not even being able to take the courses that they required in order to meet their graduation requirements. So again, at the high school level, if the diploma is the goal, those are some of those options available to you.
And the other thing I
Thanks,
wanted to
Michelle,
mention,
and I'll just interject a little bit. I think it's important to point out that parents can and very successfully do produce transcripts that allow for entrance into post-secondary institutions. And that's something that I would just point people that have questions in that regard to start. If you take a look at the MACHS website, there is a webinar that we put on in the fall about homeschooling through high school. And you'll be able to hear from parents the experiences and the challenges, but the successes that they were able to encounter. So various options and ways of doing that, and certainly appreciate hearing about the things that Manitoba Education offers as part of that package, but there's various others. So Ellen, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it really depends on what the family, the student, the parents want for the student in terms of an outcome, where the family isn't concerned about the acquiring of a Manitoba high school diploma. They have a far wider range of options. And unfortunately, if they want their student to obtain the diploma, then things are really narrowed right now. I was just going to say, Gerald, that today I got an email from the new director of the Sunrise Education Centers. Michelle, did you get that email as well?
Yeah.
It was very encouraging because they seem to be open for business. I'm assuming it's for students ages 16 and up, likely, in regards to offering courses for credits through their adult learning center, which are online. They're one of a few centers in Manitoba that offer online courses for credits at the high school level. But I think the students have to be 16 years of age. The nice part about that is that the costs for those courses are covered, other than for probably a registration fee. So that's the nice part, because with the loss of the distance learning unit, really students who do want those courses for credits towards Manitoba high school diploma, at this point, their avenues are somewhat limited.
I did want to clarify, because I see a question in the chat, that if the diploma is not your goal and you're wanting to homeschool through high school, then you revert back to the requirements for homeschooling, and those requirements remain the same from K to 12. So you would put in your notification form, you are required to cover the 4 subject areas of language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. And that requirement is for the 4 years, grade 9 to grade 12. So you don't compare it to the high school requirements for graduation, where, for example, they may not have a social studies requirement in grade 12. That's fine, because that has to do with the 30 credit that a student has to acquire for a grade 12 Manitoba high school diploma. But homeschooling remains the 4 subject areas throughout grade 9, 10, 11, and 12.
And then, of course, the other factor is going to be the entrance requirements for various institutions.
Yep.
in terms of what they're specifically looking for.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, and Gerald, they set their own admissions requirements, as you know, and it's frustrating for parents, I know, because they can change them at any point in time. And I've seen post-secondary institutions change their entrance requirements in the middle of a school year, and really blindside some families who worked with the institution towards a set of admissions requirements, and all of a sudden things changed, and it was through no fault of the family or anybody. The institution just decided to do a bit of a right turn, and then what do you do with that?
And every post-secondary institution does set their, like Alan said, their own requirements. And so we do encourage homeschool families to start thinking about that kind of around the age of 16. What is it that if they have an idea of the avenue they want to undertake, or the post-secondary education they're interested in, each institution is a bit different. We have noticed that, for example, Red River College in the trades are a little bit they're a little bit harder to, I don't know what it is, but they tend to want to see that Manitoba high school diploma, and so it may cause some issues for students looking for a specific trade or specific area of study. However, my experience with our own children was at the University of Manitoba, and they were welcome to start university as a homeschool student. So every family kind of encounters a different type of almost experience depending on the avenue the student is choosing and the institution they're interested in. And so it really, it varies from place to place and student to student.
Exactly. So Michelle, thank you for that. And I'm going to take us back to the other end of education. A number of people have been asking about, so I've got a 6-year-old. Do I need to do this progress report for my 6-year-old? And I think just to clarify what the requirements are, Peter provided some of that, but I'm not sure that everybody caught it in the chat. So the Manitoba requirements are the children between the age of 7 and 18 need to be in school, and that's when they turn 7 in that school year. Is that correct?
Correct, Gerald. So in the year in which they turn 7, that September, they must register in a school or notify for homeschooling. So in the year in which they turn 7, that particular September. Prior to that, parents are very welcome to continue to educate their children at home without submitting any paperwork, because the legal requirement is at age 7 for a September start for the year in which they turn 7.
However, we do have families that really want to submit their notification form earlier than age 7. They can start as early as the September of the year the child turns 5. So some families feel more comfortable submitting their notification for kindergarten and grade 1 as well. And we just inform the parent that if they go that route, if they decide to submit the notification form, then the requirement for the January and June report stands. So either, don't submit it, and then you're free of the paperwork for 2 years until they're 7, or, if you're going to go ahead and submit it, then also follow up with the progress report.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a question that's I think more broader or covers multiple years. I think one of the hardest questions in my experience for homeschoolers is, what grade are you in? Because so many times you get someone that it may be at one level in one subject, but in a very different level in another subject, and maybe progressing at a level or a speed that's different from those that surround them in the public school. And I think we want to be careful we're not comparing ourselves, even though yes, that we have an equivalency, but there isn't a requirement that it be exactly the same. So my question is, how do we reflect that? How do you reflect the differences in different subjects, where they may be reading at a grade 8 level, but doing math at a grade 4 level? just because of their developmental issues or challenges that they're faced with. And then with that same thing, if they're they're progressing at a different speed, how do they reflect those comments without writing a book? Because I know that you folks, as much as you care, you don't have the time to go through a whole huge book on each student, and we want to be concise.
I'm going to jump in there from the perspective of a parent. First of all, there's the social ramifications of that. Teach your kids to answer the question when you're out and about by their age. So if a child is 7, they can be grade 1 or grade 2, depending on when their birthday is and what's appropriate for where they would be at. If you might have held them back, maybe it's grade 1. If they're doing really well academically, then maybe you want them in grade 1, grade 2. But even if they're doing grade 3 work, don't teach them to say grade 3, because if they say that, then you get to grade 12. And if you still want another year with them at home, you can't tell them they're going to do grade 12 twice, or it looks like they've failed. I had that experience with my daughter. She was doing really well as a little kid, and I registered her as grade 3 when she was 7, because she'd already started kindergarten when she was 4.5, and we went along, and now she's 17 and graduating this year, and we can't keep her till she's 18, or it looks like she's failed, and she doesn't want to stay that extra year now that she's done school. She's done her 13 years. And so teach them to do what they would be if they were in the public school system. However, for reporting, that may be different. You may have different grades on different subjects and that kind of thing, but it just works well for sports and for social outings when you're answering questions, for Sunday school or whatever else they might be in, to have them with their peers for what you say they are in public. And as for reporting, I'll let you and Alan answer, Michelle.
Yeah, I think
Thanks,
you answered that really well, Larissa. What we recommend is that the age of the child is the grade level that you indicate on the form. But then, so if they're 8 years old, then they're in grade 3. And when you're reporting, for say mathematics, and you're working at a grade 1 level, just indicate that for the math program, you're working at the grade 1 level.
Yeah, and conversely, the same thing. If the student is a grade 7 student, but they are working in a grade 8 math program, you could write age appropriate grade 7, but in the math indicate that they are working at a very high instructional level, at a grade 8 level in their math. And we take that into account when we read things. We don't want you to pigeonhole your students, but Larissa's right. For the sake of simplicity, when you're out and about, that's probably the better or the best way to go. Is just what would their age appropriate grade level be? But in when the paperwork comes in, your paperwork is not handed around and shown to people. We review it. We may interact with you in regards to it. It's filed in your family file. That family file is secure. It's locked up. And at some point when your family finishes homeschooling and no longer is homeschooling, such as Gerald, I think, has done just a little while ago, then the family file is put into a secure archive that is managed by the Manitoba government. So you don't have to worry that your information is going to kind of float around. We're pretty anal in our office about making sure that the files are secure.
One other perspective to that is that the converse can happen there too, is that you can end up with a child who graduates after grade 11. If they're consistently doing the grade higher than them, you can be registered in grade 11, but be completed all your grade 12 coursework. And so I have a son who will graduate after he's done grade 11.
Yeah, both of my sons started their post-secondary education at age 17. So they were done and we moved on.
Mm-hmm.
Larissa, just as a point, the youngest student that I ever indicated had completed her high school education, she was just under the age of 16. And if you would see the phenomenal amount of work that this young lady did, her parents invited me to her house, and over a couple of pots of coffee, I looked through all of her high school work. And in the end, I was utterly shocked at the amount of work that this girl had done. She was brilliant. And her goal after that was to go into business. So she went into business with her parents. And, you know, there's a situation where the regular high school would have stood on their head and said, no way. But, you know, when you have a chance to program individually for a really gifted student, you got to give them that opportunity to soar.
Again, great question and answers that are coming in and being addressed in the chat as well. So we're getting lots of things dealt with. Michelle, when we met to talk about this meeting, one of the comments that you made was that it was up to the parents to represent learning. And I just wanted to make the comment that I think that these notification forms are really part of parents telling that story of documenting and journaling the journey that their child has been on and that they've been on together. And I think it's you know, certainly there's a requirement for parents to submit these, but I think that there's a higher purpose in parents having these for their records and being able to document that story and to be able to compile. And a number of people have been talking about, the Manitoba diploma. I think one of the things that is really powerful is simply to have the records, to have the transcript, to have the portfolio that will tell that story. And Alan, the story you've just told of that 16-year-old student, I've heard story after story of entrance officers for various institutions that when they were presented with that kind of portfolio, there was no question about admission. Yes, they had to make sure that the boxes were ticked in some kind of official ways. But if that, if the job is done over the years in representing the learning, in capturing those things, these institutions are looking, and employers are looking for good students that know how to work, that know how to learn, and that are eager, because and I think it does that well. And so I think your example is one that is showing the higher purpose and the need for this, where yes, they sent it to you, but I think people need it for their own purposes even more.
Yep.
And Gerald, I do love getting calls from families that tell me their stories of success with their children as they've completed their homeschool education. I had one last fall, or what was it? No, last spring. It was about just a little less than a year ago, from a father who told me an incredible story about his 3 daughters and their journey into adulthood from a homeschool education. And it was just such a delight. When I have the opportunity to talk with parents in regards to things like that, it just gives me a renewed purpose for the job I'm doing.
Are there other questions that people have as we've been going through this? I think we've been getting some very positive comments in the chat just about people really appreciating the discussion and the call today to provide the information. I just want to remind everybody that the recording of this workshop will be on the MACHS website, but we'll also be receiving a PDF copy of the slides that Michelle and Alan have been taking us through, and that will also post that on the website. So you'll be able to refer to those things and be able to look at them. Now, one of the things that was raised is that the 3 examples that are up on the website, they kind of have examples from a number of different kinds of educational approaches in them. And I'm wondering whether they maybe create an impression that all of that is required when they're really an example, and people need to customize it to fit their own situation.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. And that's why we did that, Gerald, so we wouldn't post 16 different examples, you know, or so. You know, if you've got 5 different approaches and you're going to look at, you know, an early, middle, and senior years a sample for each one. We just didn't want to inundate families, so we threw them together, but by no means are we expecting families are going to use a different approach for each of their subject areas. We have the odd family, believe it or not, that does that, but that's more the exception than the rule.
Right.
I did see the question in the chat about exams or testing. And I just wanted to maybe highlight that testing or exam is not required when it comes to homeschooling. So a parent may choose to follow a curriculum that includes tests, or they may want to administer some. That's completely up to the parent. It's not a requirement at all on our end or with the Manitoba Education. So what's, we do see letter grades for sure, or number grades that parents like to indicate if they've been doing that testing approach. But anecdotal information is also just as valuable.
Gerald, do you have samples of transcripts available through MACHS?
We do have some links to it, and actually on the HSLDA website there is a template and some workshops that are there on completing transcripts. So there's a number of resources both from Manitoba as well as from across Canada.
Well, that's good, because I used to have a large collection of templates that I just kept the links to. And slowly people have realized, I guess, online that they can make money by selling those, because all of the free ones that I once was accessing and sending the links to parents in regards to, they disappeared.
Yeah, there's lots of opportunities for things like that. So, but there are some links on the MACHS site, and there are some excellent templates on the HSLDA site. So
good. I have seen really excellent transcripts come in through along with reports, and I must say that in general, whenever I see families putting together a transcript, they're well done.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not an easy process, but it's a very important one, and it's one that certainly is doable. I'm just another question that's come in. Laura says, I've been putting down what we've been doing or covering. I don't put any observations of the child. Is that okay? So it's is it content, or do you need to know more than that? So any response, Ellen or Michelle?
I think yeah, put down what the child is doing and covering. That's great. If ever the liaison that's reading the report had a question, they'd give a call and ask for clarification if it's needed. Some families think that because they never hear from a liaison that nobody's reading these forms that are coming in, but I can assure you that every single form is read, and every single form passes through the liaison. And so of course we won't call every single family. Unfortunately, that's not possible. But sometimes, there's a comment on the form that piques our curiosity or our interest, and we just call to have a nice conversation. Other times to introduce ourselves, and sometimes because we need clarification. So it really depends on that day at work, but we do try and connect with as many families as we can.
Okay, excellent. David asks, in regard to equivalency, is there a template or something that says by such and such a grade, a student should be able to describe such and such? I know that there's various scope and sequence documents that are out there, and Manitoba Education certainly has vast volumes of curriculum things, but they're huge binders that don't go into are not, they're usable by the school, but a very concise document is there's some around, but they're maybe harder to find.
In more, Gerald,
Any comments on
actually,
that question?
I was going to say, in more recent years, the Curriculum Essentials Guide that was published by Manitoba Education is about a 3-pager. And
Okay.
it covers mathematics, science, and social studies for the grade levels K to 8. And so those are nice reference points, I guess, for parents, because they're pretty user-friendly and very short. Typically the first page is all they ever look at anyway, which talks about, the main topics or clusters and that kind of thing. So that's where I would usually refer a parent if they're wanting that information. Because yeah, you're right, those other documents are a little bit much.
I see,
I've put into the, if I could just.
I see Peter has provided a link to a document
Thank
as
you.
well.
Yeah. And also My Child in School is a website that also gives a broad strokes picture of what a student should have acquired, at the end of each grade level. It doesn't give you a lot of specifics, but provides more of a general outlook. And if you Google My Child in School, Peter, maybe you can find that link and throw it on the chat as well. Yeah, Peter's nodding, he's done it. Okay.
Yeah, he's already got it posted. Well, I think we're winding down with questions, and I'm just going to ask Larissa, from your perspective as a homeschool parent, what questions do you see as remaining? I think we've made it through our list of questions that we had posed to Ellen and Michelle.
I see that there's one asking for a response from them, if either of them has seen the MACHS webinar that was done in December about January reports, if they could comment on that one.
We haven't, I haven't seen it yet. We definitely had a conversation with MACHS prior to their webinar, but we haven't actually seen the final product and what they posted. If they gave detailed samples or examples, it's certainly an approach. It's one of many ways to report. It's not the only way, and it's certainly not the required way. So families definitely have, the opportunity to represent the learning in their style. And so I think MACHS was maybe trying to equip families with some ideas. And so I would look to that as another sample or way to represent the learning, but it's not necessarily the only way.
And I haven't seen it myself.
Nor have I.
I think I see a
one of the
question. I
questions
see a question
is
about.
there a,
Sorry, I was just going to say,
Go
I
ahead,
see a
Michelle.
question about continuing into July and August. And certainly if a parent decided to continue into the summer months, that's completely up to them. And it would report in June. And then if they continue learning, great. And then, that can carry over into the following school year when they do the reporting.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Michelle, I've had some families that have issued a June report in early July, but then when they've notified in early September, they issued a report in regards to their summer learning. And what I wanted to say to parents is that anytime you wish to submit any documentation related to your student or students' learning, we will accept it, we will read it, and we will ensure it goes into your family file. Nothing you ever send to us is thrown away. Nothing. We file everything after we've had a chance to review it. So I've got families that, do just that. They have a summer report that they just generate on their own. We don't ask them for it. They just, it comes in with the student notification form along with a note that says, please put this in my family file.
I have a few things to say about that. There are many homeschool families that school year round. So if you choose to spread your school year out over the summer months, that's fine. Or if a child hasn't finished something that they should have finished and didn't keep up your expectations, feel free to finish that in the summer. But also, no laughing, Alan.
Sorry.
Been there, done that. But the other aspect of it is, if you've done a full school year and you're just not where you'd like to be, there's no reason why you can't shelf that till fall either and finish it in the fall. You need a break, and so do your kids, and don't feel guilty if you take that. You need a summer if you've been doing a regular public school year. Yeah, there's such a thing as summer school, but most people don't do that. Usually if you end up partway through something, you finish later. I have one child who started in September and took it right until October the following year, and did that 3 years in a row. But that was my conscious choice to make a guide spread out that far. And then since then, he started one in January, started the next in December, started the next in November, as I've had more time to spend with him. And by the time he enters high school, he'll be starting in September. And by the time he graduates, we're hopefully going to be ready by the MACHS conference so he can graduate at the end of March. All of my kids start their school years, their different subjects at different times of the year. And that gives me as a parent more time to spend with them, to finish well, to give them some time off while I finish preparing what I didn't do in the summer, to switch their binders over, all that kind of thing. And then we start a new guide, a new year in the middle of the school year. And I find that works really well, time management wise, for me. So make it work how you want it to work, and don't feel like you're constrained by September to June, but feel free to make it work for you. Homeschooling has a lot of freedom that the public school can't offer.
Yeah, and to that end, Larissa, if a family has a student by the middle of May who's finished a grade level and wants to start on their next grade level, it's really helpful for us to know that that is happening and what their programming is that they're starting with next. So that we have a sense of how that's going. I have a few students who are doing just that. They at the high school level, they're real go-getters, and as a result, they're squeezing 4 years into little over 3.
Yeah, I have a 10-year-old that did that last year. He did 1 year and 7 units of a 35 unit thing. And so, yeah, I just write down in my June report that we have already started, and then start off with what unit we're starting in September.
Ellen, when you started out your presentation, you talked about how we didn't have some of the kinds of very recipe-driven requirements in Manitoba that some other provinces have. We don't have that we have to teach X number of days or X number of hours or those kinds of things. And I think that's important because as sometimes as frustrating as the undefined nature of equivalency is, I think that very few people choose to home educate in order to do the bare minimum. They want to do the things that are special and targeted and appropriate for their children. And to be able to have that flexibility, to be able to homeschool all year long if that fits the family, or to take a break at a different time of what the public school might be doing, that's fully acceptable. And it's a matter of parents representing that, not asking permission for it, but just representing that as part of the learning process. And I certainly appreciate the attitude that all of you are bringing to the task that you have before you in being able to help document that. And it's up to parents to do it. But I think that what we hear from you is that you're supporting parents in that as best you can and enabling them to do that. And we just want to say thank you for what you're doing and the ways that you're doing it and the attitude that you're bringing to doing it in.
All right, you know, over the years, Gerald, I've really come to realize that the best thing that we can do is to ensure that parents are successful so that their students, their children are going to be successful. Because I think if we don't do as much as we can, down the road, we all kind of pay for that, you know, not just the student or the parent or we in our old age when that person may need to push us around the old folks home. But, you know, we do need to be there for the parents, because if they're going to choose to homeschool, we want them to be successful. That's the worst thing that I fear, is when a parent phones me and says, I've had it, I don't want to do this anymore, you know. And sometimes I've had parents who've said that not because they weren't doing a good job, but because their immediate family or their extended family was giving them such a hard time about their choice to homeschool. And so sometimes I've been on the phone with parents just propping them up because they're doing a really good job, but they're getting no support from anybody around them that's really important to them.
Well, thank you for that. And we, as I said, we'll be posting this to our website so that we can have people can go back and listen to it. They can say to their friends and family, if there's things that you missed, here it is. It'll be available. It'll be a few days to get it up there, but it will be up on the MACHS website, and it'll be available along with the presentation and the presentations from the others. And I think we're going to try and see whether we can do this again later in the year, so that we can do a briefing and a discussion in preparation for the June time, that we can sort of address those things. So I think it's an excellent way to be able to say, here's the basics, here's some ideas, what are your questions, and work our way through them. And I think we've done that here this evening. So Michelle and Ellen and Peter and Larissa, thank you very much for your participation. And with that, we'll sign off for this evening and look forward to, if you have ongoing questions, MACHS has some websites, as does, or has the Facebook pages where you can ask questions on an ongoing basis. And I know Larissa has a great one in Westman that is very active. So lots of places where you can be getting input from other homeschoolers and their experience, because we can learn a lot from each other. So thank you all, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Gerald, for the invitation. We so appreciate it. Thank you. You have a great evening as well. Be well, everybody.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.